So I get questions a lot of how do I set up my GameCube setup to allow me to play on multiple video games at the same time with one controller. So by the end of this video, you're going to know everything you need to know with how to set things up, what do you need, and how does it work. Today's video is also sponsored by Retro Island Gaming. If you've been to live streams recently, you would hear me talk about this video game store all the time. They're based out of Long Island, New York. They also have an online store, of course, linked down below in the description. You also can go to their Twitch and or YouTube channel and literally watch their store live. They live stream the entire time the store is open. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you literally can ask them in real time. So if you have any questions about do they have this video game, do they have this console, do they have different types of snacks and plushies, because yeah, they really do have that stuff. Check them out, link down below in the description, or literally go directly to them. I'll have all the links to all of their social media down below in the description. But I need to make that very clear because this setup would not be possible without their help, because I traded a ton of video games to them in order to get this setup completed. So now that I can finally do everything that I've wanted to do for shiny hunting for the past 2 years. Now going forward, I'm going to slowly keep building up my inventory of like Pokemon games and stuff like that, so I can keep doing more and more cool projects. So with that out of the way, let me explain to you my entire setup, how it works, and really cool stuff you should know about shiny hunting if you ever have a GameCube setup. So to keep things really simple for my actual setup, this is how it works. I have 3 GameCubes. The regular yellow, white, and red cables, they plug into an HDMI adapter. You can pick these up from Retro Island because one of the adapters I got from Retro. Basically, you plug the cables into the adapter, then you plug an HDMI cable into each adapter, then you plug the HDMI cable into one of your capture cards. Now for my personal setup, as of making this video, I have 3 separate Elgato capture cards. I'm not sponsored by them. I've just literally had these capture cards for more than 5+ years, okay? So you basically plug the HDMI cable into each individual capture card, and then you have to add each individual capture card into a scene in your OBS studio. Of course, the best way to optimize your capture card and your footage is make sure you manually edit everything. Like, I don't ever use like automatic settings because I'm playing on multiple copies at the same time. So I want everything to be running at the same exact quality so that it doesn't overwork or nothing weird happens. So if you're gonna do this, make sure that you purposely set all of the exact same settings for each capture card individually, because that's what I do, and that's what's able to make this stuff run as smooth as possible. Keep in mind, my computer is really powerful. It's also not even like a current model computer to have, but it's been powerful enough for like more than 5 years now, and it's still able to process, you know, having 3 capture cards, live streaming, and recording the footage locally. So yeah, if you're curious of how like my actual like streaming and recording setup is happening when I'm actually streaming and stuff, I'm doing all of that stuff. I'm live streaming the footage. All of the stuff is going through OBS, and I'm also recording it on my computer so I can get the best quality possible from whatever I'm doing. And obviously most situations I'm shiny hunting. So that is how the setup looks on paper and how it works with everything powered up and ready to go. Obviously I have a very powerful computer. I've had this computer for a long time. And of course, eventually I'm going to have to upgrade it because, well, I need more power to do more stuff, unfortunately. So that's why having like this 3 times GameCube setup currently is perfect for me, because I'm able to have a smooth live stream, and as well as I can record all of my footage locally on my computer so I can have the best quality for my live stream stuff that happens like directly on my computer, so I can edit stuff in a better quality for when I make actual videos in the future. So here we have the official Game Boy Player startup disc. This is the actual official box and like a container. Like, this is the official stuff that you would get if you had purchased this way back in the day. I was able to get this again from Retro Island Gaming. This was actually a trade-in from a viewer of mine and a viewer of just the community for Retro Island, Fox808. Literally, I was wanting to trade video games to Retro Island. They were also trading this Game Boy player with the official disc. So literally the timing was so perfect. So thank you again, Fox, for literally trading this in. I love this so very much. And obviously now I get to show everybody this beautiful copy of a Game Boy player complete in box with an actual Game Boy player disc. Everything's already set up. The Game Boy players are at the bottom. You can see that there is the Firered copy already there. So everything's already set up. So keep that in mind. For simplicity reasons, I'm not going to show you the entire setup in real time. That would just take forever. It's a super mess with cables and stuff. That's why we had the graphic picture I made to kind of just showcase things in super simple ways. So obviously the first video game is booted up. One of the best things about using the official player disc is that once you start up one of the Gamecubes, once the video game has like started up, you literally can take the disc out and you put it into a different Gamecube because the actual player disc is not running the entire time you're using it. So when people are interested in getting a setup like this, you literally just need one player disc. That's it. Of course, you can buy whatever Game Boy player adapter for your Gamecubes, because obviously I have a different one to match the Indigo Gamecube because that one I had to buy off eBay. But one of the things I wanted to also mention is that if you have a Gamecube like I do, you can clearly tell I put the Game Boy player disc into the Gamecube. It did not boot correctly, even though the disc is in the system. Like, this is a problem you may run into just because you have an older Gamecube. It could be a multiple of reasons of what's not working correctly, but more than likely it's the laser is not working properly. So this works out good for me because typically the best thing to fix this issue is literally just leaving the system on, letting it like warm up, and then I turn on a different Gamecube. And then I take the player disc out and put it back into that Gamecube. This has been a recent problem that happens more and more. So eventually I'm going to have to just fix this Gamecube altogether. But truly, it still works. And like I said, the bonus part about the official player disc for the Game Boy player is you literally just need the laser to work long enough to boot into the software, because then it stops working. As you can clearly tell, both Firered copies are working. The Japanese video games for Pokemon will work on these Gamecubes. These are all English Gamecubes. So the Game Boy player itself is not region locked. That's why you're able to play Japanese Pokemon games. So now that the one Gamecube has basically been like warmed up, the disc is now working, so we can actually boot into it. I really wanted to showcase in this video because this is a problem that I feel like somebody's going to have if they get a setup like this, because you may purchase a Gamecube for really, really cheap and you may think it's a deal, but in reality, something like this may happen. If you buy a Gamecube from Retro Island Gaming, that's not going to be the issue because I have a Gamecube from them, but I'm basically using this one right now because I'd rather save the really nice Gamecube that I have from them because it's just kind of like a backup. So I'd rather keep using the one that is having issues until it stops working altogether. So that's just a personal choice. But truly, once everything is working, you can clearly tell that we are good to go. So how the Wavebird controller works with multiple receivers is you basically set the frequency to the same frequency on all three receivers, and of course the Wavebird controller has to be on the same frequency as well. So for this example, each receiver is on number 1, the controller's on number 1, and you can tell I'm checking to see if I have a shiny Charmander. I'm pressing the buttons. You can see in real time that all the receivers are working all at the same time. The only difference, though, is when you play an English copy and a Japanese copy of Pokemon, the Japanese copy tend to be a little faster. So you do have to time it a little correctly to make sure it works properly. So if you don't know, This is not something that's exclusive to the Wavebird. You can actually soft reset with the official hardware for Pokemon. So if you just want a singular Game Boy player, you can literally do this with a regular controller that's plugged in, or a Wavebird, or any like third-party Wavebird controller. You press Start, B, A, and X at the same time. That's pretty much how you soft reset. So obviously for me, I'm playing on 3 systems at the same time. This just makes things really, really easy to multitask. That's literally the main reason why you would do this in the first place. So, and the bonus part is you're not turning off the system, you're just soft resetting the video game, which allows you to basically focus on your shiny hunting without having to mess with the Game Boy player disc ever again. Like once it's working, once you're booted into your video game, that's it. That's why this setup is so cool, because you literally do not have to have an individual Game Boy player disc for each system. You literally just need the one. You know, obviously for my examples you've been seeing me do in this video, I make it very obvious that like I'm controlling all 3 games at the same time. So yeah, this is it. This is how the Game Boy player works. It's so cool. So obviously you don't have to take out the wireless receiver in order to change the frequency. I'm just doing this to like showcase like how you would actually change the channel. It's kind of hard to see because my lighting was not the best, and even if I try to fix the lighting, it didn't really like help the visual of it. But basically what I did is I changed the number on the receiver and I changed it right here on the Wavebird, okay? Just like the autofocus wasn't really doing all that much. It was not really helping me. But anyway, so basically what I did was I changed the receiver and my controller. Why that is super useful is if you find a shiny Pokemon and you're trying to catch it, because most of the time you're going to do this for like random encounter shiny hunting, not really for soft resets. You would want to basically change the receiver channel so that you can only focus on that one particular video game, so you don't accidentally do something weird on your other multiple copies you're playing on. So obviously for this example, I'm showcasing what it would be like if you were just, you know, shiny hunting and doing a soft reset for Charmander on one system and not all 3 of them. But as you can clearly tell, I switched back to the main channel, which was, I believe, 1 was when I was recording. And obviously I can go back to controlling the other 2 receivers. So it's pretty simple, but it's super important to know this, because if you want to know how awesome a setup like this would be, this is how it is. Like you literally can just adjust when things happen, and you could set it back to how they were once you're done, like for example, catching a shiny or saving a video game that found a shiny, or whatever the situation is. You literally can take control of each individual system whenever you want. You just have to adjust things accordingly. So fun fact, on the actual Game Boy player itself, there's a button you can press and it'll push out your video game. I wanted to showcase this mainly because you can kind of see the other one. It kind of just like pops out right there. But I mainly just wanted to show the fact that I'm playing on authentic hardware. This is just a Japanese copy of Pokemon Firered that I recently got as well from Retro Island Gaming. And then here is my English copy of Pokemon Firered, which is a copy of Pokemon I've had for many, many years. So again, they're both authentic. You can see the little 4 squares, little rectangles on the left-hand side. The only difference mainly is like aesthetically, the Japanese version is a little more transparent, so it's a little easier to see. But they're literally authentic video games. It's all authentic stuff. I don't want to emulate. I don't want to play fake copies. That's why I purchased Japanese Pokemon games, so I can still have an authentic experience while working with a budget. Like I said earlier in the video, it doesn't matter what Game Boy player you have. That's why I purposely bought a Indigo Game Boy player to match the GameCube that I have. One, it was also to complete the GameCube itself, because this is a GameCube that I got from my grandma, and just having everything color match looks really, really nice. The Game Boy player itself is not region locked, but if you have an English GameCube, you have to use the English boot up disc. So if if you have a modded GameCube, for example, that can play English and Japanese video games, then you can use a Japanese Game Boy player disc. But seeing that each GameCube I'm currently showcasing, they're all like North American English GameCubes, I have to have an English Game Boy player disc to make all this stuff work. So as I'm making this video, I don't have my like perfect setup for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. That's still something I'm trying to do. But I do have this Pokemon Sapphire that I got from them. And they also replaced the battery, and I've actually played on it a little bit and it's all working great. The reason why you would replace the battery is mainly because of soft resets. Because if the battery is dry, you're going to have the same like shiny hunting RNG problem that Pokemon Emerald has. So for me personally, that's why I love Retro Island, because if you want to replace the battery, it does cost a little more, but it's super important for shiny hunting on Ruby and Sapphire, regardless if it's an English copy or a Japanese copy, it's the same exact problem. So it's kind of hard to showcase the squares on the Sapphire copy by just looking at it, but I can tell you 100% it's an authentic copy. It's just, like I said, a little hard to tell with just like my current like setup. This is all authentic stuff. This is why I like playing on authentic, regardless if it's English or Japanese. Like I will find a way to make it work on Japanese Pokemon games. We have like translator apps on our phones if you're like really confused on things. In the grand scheme of things, it may not be a perfect translation, but it'll at least give you like an idea of like what is being said on screen. So at the end of the day, you know, my main pitch to everybody watching this video is like, even though this took me 2 years to like get the initial setup put together, it's still super interesting to be able to do this in 2024 and beyond, because this is going to be something I'm going to be doing for as long as I can, honestly, because like this is all authentic stuff. Like we're literally using the Wavebird controller in a really bizarre way, but like this is just really cool, right? So I love this, and the fact of everything you would ever need for this setup can be purchased at Retro Island Gaming. That's amazing. The one-stop shop for everything retro and even brand new. The only problem you're probably going to have in terms of purchasing things is the actual Wavebird controller itself. Since Retro has opened up their store and since I've been working with them for the past couple months, I don't think there's ever been a time they've actually had a Wavebird controller long enough in their inventory. Pretty much everything else they will have at some point or another. So one thing I also wanted to mention while we're playing Pokemon Sapphire here is that you can use the controller stick to move around, or you can use the directional pad. It really doesn't matter. That's really just comes down to preference. But I did want to showcase this a little bit while playing Pokemon Sapphire, just to showcase that like, yes, like Japanese Pokemon games work, and that's super awesome. In a different video, I'll showcase like, you know, Generation 1 and 2. I'm just not purposely playing those generations right now because I don't have multiple copies of the games. A lot of my Gen 2 copies have dry batteries, and you like kind of need a working battery in that generation specifically to save your video game. So yeah, but anyways, like you've been watching, like this stuff is really cool, and I hope this like answers any questions you may have about like, can you play Japanese Pokemon games? Can you play English copies on a Game Boy player? Like just any general questions you may have. That's why I'm over explaining things in this video, because I truly want people to know it really is that simple once you have all the requirements and all the equipment together to make all this stuff work. So here's another example of ways you could like boot up the Gamecubes to go into the Game Boy player. I don't personally do it this way, but I figured I might as well just show it, just because, you know, I have all this equipment, might as well showcase, you know, different ways you could do things. So obviously we're done with the Pokemon Sapphire, and I wanted to just showcase this really fast. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to boot up your Gamecubes and then just get them to the main menu, move up to the gameplay option, and then you can boot up the first Gamecube into the Game Boy player. As you can see right there, the disc was still spinning, so I was actually a little early on that one. So make sure you really wait until the video game is like booted up. The best time to take out the actual Game Boy player disc is once the video game is actually playing. That's enough time to safely take out the Game Boy player disc and then move it to a different system. So again, patience is your friend here, friends. You really don't have to wait that long. It's literally like seconds, but truly just make sure you wait long enough and then you will just basically move the Game Boy player disc to another GameCube. Now this is just like another way to do it, just to showcase that it does work this way, even if you do it one system at a time, because I don't know, it's just interesting to talk about super old, video game systems being used in a way that like you normally wouldn't do. But since, I spend so much time shiny hunting and I have like interesting equipment, I might as well show it off. So now that we are booted up into all three video games, basically, to sync them up again, because I'm obviously doing soft resets, you would just, press the B button to go back to the main menu if it's not like synced up. But clearly, the only thing that's a problem, like I said earlier in this video, is when you play an English Pokemon game versus a Japanese Pokemon game. The Japanese Pokemon games tend to be a little faster with the text speed, even though they're basically set to the same exact speed. That doesn't really matter. It's just the Japanese games just play faster in general. So regardless, that's just another way you can boot up your Game Boy player for each system and just continue on with your shiny hunting. Old school 4-player link cable for Game Boy Advanced. I used some store credit at a later time when I traded in even more video games to the store, so I could obviously, use these trade link cables so I could trade Pokemon while using the Game Boy player, because that is an actual thing you can do. So spoiler alert, to make it really simple, these cables did not work well with the Game Boy player. Half the time it kept showing me that there was like some type of error with the cables not being connected properly. I would get communication errors when it finally was working. I was able to actually get into the trading sequence, but it just kept not working. So I was like, well, this is kind of a problem, because I want to be able to showcase that, you can actually, trade Pokemon on the Game Boy player. So the last thing I did try though is I do have, Game Boy Advanced. So I was like, well, let me try that out and see if the cables themselves actually work. Like maybe I got a bad copy of the cables. You never know, stuff happens. So long story short, when I use the actual original hardware, it works. So I don't know if it's an issue with the Game Boy player. I tried using both English Game Boy players and the Japanese one, because the purple one, that is a Japanese Game Boy player, but the actual trade cable spot is all the same. Everything is the same on each version of the Game Boy player. But I did some intense troubleshooting to try and figure this out, because I was like, there's no way it just doesn't work. So technically it was working, but it just for whatever reason would not allow me to trade Pokemon, because every time it basically got ready to go, it just stopped working. So do these trade cables work on actual handheld devices? Yes. Did it work for the Game Boy player? No. So hopefully in a future video, when I update this setup and get more stuff, I will, by that time, one of the upgrades I'm gonna get is actual official link cables, because I think that's what's going to fix the issue. So this is not Retro's fault. I truly thought these link cables were going to work, and they technically do. It's just they don't work for the Game Boy player, because I've had different trade cables back in the day, but I was just borrowing them. So I didn't physically own my own cables to do trading of Pokemon. So realistically, I will just have to follow up with how to trade Pokemon with the Game Boy player in a future video. But for right now, unfortunately, this did not work But of course, since I do have stuff from many, many years ago that I can, play on and actually trade the Pokemon with these trade cables, like they worked. So they work how they're supposed to. They just don't work with the Game Boy player, which was, again, my very unique situation of me trying to, basically just have the Game Boy players do everything. Unfortunately, we just can't do it right now. But that's okay. I know I will get the stuff required at a later time. So that is everything you need to know about how to set up multiple GameCubes so that you can either use it for live content, or you're recording it for videos, or if you just wanted to know something interesting, this is how I use multiple GameCubes so that I can literally look for more shiny Pokemon, in theory faster, because I get to play 3 different video games at the same time using one controller. So again, if you haven't caught on by now, everything is on official hardware. There is not a single hardware modification. Everything is authentic. Cannot stress that enough. Like, this is literally the coolest thing that you can do with authentic hardware from Nintendo if you're able to find this stuff in the wild. Obviously, I'm going to tell you to go to Retro Island Gaming for this stuff, because most of the stuff you can get from them will be in great condition. It'll be exactly what you need. The only thing I think was probably going to be the hardest thing to find and purchase from them personally is the Wavebird controller. That's probably going to be the most difficult thing to find, but they sometimes do actually get it at the store. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them down below in the comments section. Again, in the future, when I do upgrade this setup to the better setup, I will definitely let you know, because there will be a different video explaining all the upgrades I got for my setup. But for now, this is exactly how my GameCube setup works in a very over-explained video, but I kind of had to make it this way because I want people to be educated on this stuff, and I want people to know that this stuff truly just does work on authentic hardware, and it's really, really cool. I also wanted to over-explain because this stuff is so expensive, so I want people to know as much information as possible so that they can make a good decision on if they should purchase this stuff or pass on it. So my name's SMK. You can always just call me Steven. Thanks for listening to me over explain and showcase a very interesting setup of using multiple GameCubes to literally, in theory, find shiny Pokemon a little bit faster. So I live stream right here on YouTube and on my Twitch channel. Hope to see you sometime soon. And don't forget to shop at Retro Island Gaming. Link down below in the description.